Monster Professor.
Welcome to the Monster Professor, a show in which we discuss and explore monsters in literature, myth, film, games, folklore, culture, and beyond. We're going to dig deep, so be prepared. I'm your host, Josh Woods, author, editor, professor, and monster expert. Before we get started today, I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping, so to speak, a response to some of the emails I've gotten and messages I've gotten, and a few questions that have come up about the Monster Professor. So one that I keep getting is, when are you going to give me more of blank? Like, how about more on the Gothic, or how about more on werewolves, or how about more on all sorts of subjects that we've touched on in past episodes, but that absolutely deserve to be revisited, that merit digging into even deeper. The Gothic, for instance, I've gotten, a handful of messages from different listeners saying, oh, that was great, but I want you to dig deeper into this one or that one, or you forgot to mention one thing or another. You mentioned Rats in the Walls and never said anything about it in that episode. Give me more. Absolutely right. I think all those comments are well-founded. In fact, I do plan very much on having part 2 of all sorts of large concepts, like, part 2 of werewolves absolutely needs to come along, because there's a whole lot more that we didn't even touch on, right? Part 2 of serpents and dragons, right? Absolutely. A whole lot more of them. And so when I do one of these episodes, I always have in the back of my mind, I'm going to try to cut it off at about 40 minutes, but there will be so much that I've only just barely skimmed the surface on, or so much that I had to leave out. And I've got unlimited number of future podcasts so available to me. And so at any point I can get back in for part 2, part 3, maybe part 4, who knows? Another question is, well, how many of these do you have planned out before you call it quits? Well, I don't know. That's a good question. When I first considered even doing this at all, I wondered whether or not I would have enough monsters to even talk about to fill up, a dozen episodes or so. And so I thought I would sit down and just make a list of different monsters and different types of monster episodes I'd want to do. And if I could come up with 20, then I would do it. And no time at all, I had 105 that was the minimum number I needed to do. And then ever since I started it, many, many more have been adding to the list. And then every one of them that I cover is worthy of a second one or a third episode on it. So I have no idea how long this is going to go or how many episodes. Another question that comes up is, why do you have the explicit warning on your podcast on, say, iTunes and that kind of thing, when I haven't heard you cuss or swear or any of that stuff? Well, that's a good question too. I didn't realize that I haven't cussed. I can if you want me to, but I thought with the explicit stuff, we're talking about monsters. So if you're like faint of heart and you can't handle a bad word, then you absolutely can't handle the idea of cannibal monsters or being raised from the dead. And I also want the freedom to say any damn thing I want to say anytime I want to say it. So there's why I put the explicit warning, just in case I feel like talking about anything, or in case anyone thinks it's not safe. With all that said, plenty of people tell me that their children listen to the podcast, or young students do. In fact, at one of these live events, one of the most active audience members was a brilliant young man who surely couldn't have been any older than 12. And so I think monsters are for all ages. Just as terrifying things are for all ages. I see no reason at all to guard the youth from monsters. In fact, I think in many ways, children get monsters in a natural, instinctive way that as adults we have to work hard to regain some of that understanding. But every reason to still have an explicit warning on there, just in case. And one little final housekeeping note I thought I might mention. This upcoming spring semester, spring 2019, I will be teaching a Tolkien literature class, and that one is an absolute blast. So if you are living in the Southern Illinois area and you're looking for a college class that focuses on the works of Tolkien, primarily Lord of the Rings, and you want it at the college level, Josh Woods is your man. Look me up. I think it's going to be a great class. All right. So for this episode, this is Halloween weekend, or essentially the weekend before Halloween, the greatest time of year. And so for this episode, this is Halloween. So I take this episode as my opportunity to just randomly talk about anything relating to Halloween that I love. And I freaking love Halloween. I think I love everything about it. And so I'm going to jump around all over the place. I'm not sticking specifically to monsters in this episode. We'll get back to that in our next episode, which is a really cool one coming up. But this Halloween episode, I'm going to be all over cool Halloween stuff. So let's see. I want to tell you Let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story about Stingy Jack. Stingy Jack was a drunk old sinner. He would go down to the tavern or the pub, and he would con people out of buying them drinks. He would con people out of their own money. He conned a guy out of his own boots one time. He would con people out of their own mules that they rode to get down to the pub. Their only way of getting back down the winding dirt paths at night when they're all drunk and too drunk to even walk there. And he would get that drunk too. And he was a thief and a liar and just about every bad thing you can imagine. And one day the devil came a-calling, and devil said, the devil found him in the pub, and he's like, "Look, old Stingy Jack, your time is coming, and your soul's gonna be mine. Because you're about to die, and you've been doing nothing but ripping people off and drinking and sinning your whole life. And so I get you now. And so come on with me down to hell." And Stingy Jack goes, "Oh, you know what? You got me. You're right. I knew this was coming. So you wouldn't begrudge a good old sinner one last drink. I've been living my whole life for you, devil. Just give me one last drink." Devil goes, "Well, I'm not going to tell somebody not to do one last sin before I drag them down to hell. Go ahead. Barkeep, bring him a drink." And so he gets a big mug of beer and he drinks it down. He's like, "Wouldn't you know, I don't have a coin. I don't have a silver coin to pay the barkeep. So would you mind? I know, I've heard you can turn yourself into anything, devil. Would you just turn yourself into a coin? We'll pay it, and then when the barkeep's back is turned, you can turn back into the devil and we'll run off. That'll be one like little extra sin. Won't that be fun on our way down to hell?" And the devil's like, "Sounds good to me." So he turns himself into a silver coin. Stingy Jack picks up the silver coin, which is the devil himself, and puts it in his pocket where he had a little crucifix waiting there for this moment. And with the crucifix pressed up against the devil in his silver form, he couldn't change back out of it. And the devil is mad, man. And Stingy Jack's like, "Looks like I got you too." And the devil's like, "You let me out of here." He goes, "I'll only let you out if you give me 10 more years. And the devil's like, fine, I'll give you 10 more years, but after that, I'm coming back. And so he lets him out and takes off. And so Stingy Jack gets 10 more years of conning people and tricking people and taking everything for himself. And then 10 years later, devil finds him in the pub again. He's like, now you're coming with me. He's like, you know what? I am. You got me this time. Let's go on down the path. And so they're walking out of the pub down the path toward hell. And then there's this fruit tree there, an apple tree. And Stingy Jack's like, look, I'm so hungry. I've been drinking all day and haven't eaten a thing. Could you give me just one last apple? Because I know, devil, you're good at getting people to eat fruit, and I just want one more bite of that. I'd be honored to have a bite of a fruit that the devil got for me before I head down to hell. And the devil's like, well, all right, Stingy Jack, I'll climb on up here and get you a fruit. Maybe I'll get you one with a worm in it and make it really bad for you. And so the devil climbs on up that tree, and while he's up there nabbing that fruit, Stingy Jack is throwing out crosses all around the tree, around its perimeter. And the devil's like, what are you doing? Because he can't climb down now if there are crosses all around the tree. He's like, looks like I got you again, devil. I tell you what, give me 10 more years and I'll let you down. And the devil's like, fine, you got me again. I hate you, Stingy Jack. And so Stingy Jack takes up the crosses. The devil jumps down out of the tree and takes off. Well, 10 more years of drinking and sinning. And then his time finally comes, but the devil's not there for his soul. And so he dies, and he's wondering who's coming to collect his soul. And so he marches on up to the pearly gates of heaven, and heaven's like, no, Stingy Jack, you are in the wrong place. You go straight to hell. And so Stingy Jack's like, all right. So he marches his way down to the gates of hell. He's like, come on, let me in. It's my time now. And the gatekeeper at hell goes, no, devil said you're not admitted. He doesn't want you anymore. He's done with you. He's like, well, what am I supposed to do? And then they go, here, he left this for you. And they give him a little ember, which is too hot for him to hold. And so he has to keep it in a lantern. They're like, look, carve out this turnip, keep your little ember in that, and now you're cursed to walk the earth every night. And I want you to, and you're supposed to carry this ember around so that everybody knows that you're a lost soul that was such a con man and such a swindler and so stingy that you tricked the devil himself, and now you're forced to wander the earth, a lost soul. And so off Stingy Jack goes, and every night he's carrying his little jack-o'-lantern, this little hellfire ember in a carved out turnip, and for all to see. And you might even see him in the distance if you're walking around at Halloween night. And that's the story of the jack-o'-lantern. Isn't that cool? Halloween is awesome. What's something else about Halloween I want to talk about? Oh, Harry Houdini? Houdini? Do you know he died on Halloween? He was not only the greatest magician, I think the entertainer, magician, illusionist, escape artist of the tradition, but he was up and coming at the time that spiritualism was in its real heyday. And we talked about that back in the ghost episodes, how big spiritualism got. But a lot of the spiritualists, a lot of the mediums were pulling little tricks that well-trained magicians knew. In fact, some of them created those tricks. And so Houdini kind of took it upon himself to expose all these frauds who were saying they were really communicating with spirits when in fact they were doing rather simple parlor trick style magic that Houdini knew very well, and in fact came up with some of the tricks that they were using. And so he ended up being kind of one of these skeptic exposers, kind of like James Randi or something like that. But his desire for something real, his desire for connection with the spirit world never really went away, because he was always really fascinated with that concept. And so before he died, he made a deal with his wife, Bess. He died in 26, and he said, for a decade, I want you to try to do a seance every week to summon me back. And if anybody can give you our secret code, you know it's me communicating with you. Because if there's anybody who could escape death and escape wherever we go as spirits in the afterlife, I'll figure out a way. I'm Harry freaking Houdini, and I will find a way to slip the bonds and come down and give you this message. And so every week on Sunday, every week, same time every week, his wife Bess would hold a seance waiting for the secret message. And in addition to every week, every Halloween, there would be this huge public seance trying to recommunicate with Harry Houdini, led by his wife, although they would hire a professional medium, of course, but it was her deal. And so they did that for 10 years. And the last seance was in 1936, and there was a recording of it. You can get on YouTube and find the recording of the last seance held by his wife, and this whole crew and journalists were there and everything. They're trying to communicate with Harry Houdini. And you know what? Everybody tried to say, oh, he came with this message, but no one did it. And she finally revealed it. The message was, Rosabelle, believe. Rosabelle, believe. It was a reference to a song Bess was singing when they first met and fell in love, and I thought that was cool. But you know what? She never satisfactorily got that message out of any medium. So if Harry Houdini's spirit's still out there on the other side, maybe the locks of death are a little bit too tough to escape even for him. Who knows? But isn't that cool? Kinds of things I want to talk about. How about I'll talk about the movie Halloween, the original 70s John Carpenter Halloween. That is a fantastic film. It's absolutely amazing. And it was done on such a small budget. They were kind of just film school students with a weird kind of indie producer that just threw a little bit of cash at them and said, you know, have at it, kids. And there was a really small skeleton crew of them that were multitasking. Like any one on the crew would like act and then do sound and then do catering and everything all at once. And they filmed it out in California, but you watch this thing and you really feel like you're in autumn, you know, in Illinois. It's set in this fantastical or fictional Haddonfield, Illinois. And I think part of the reason I love this thing is it's spent so much time patiently letting you absorb this atmosphere. You really get a sense that you're walking around this town, and every now and then in the middle of the day, the shape would like walk out from behind the hedges, and you'd get a glimpse of him, and then he's gone. And bit by bit, like every little bit of suspense builds up, but not without also building the atmosphere and the feel of being in this town. You know, there were, if we're going to call it a slasher film, I don't even really think it was that much of a slasher film. Halloween 2, which was also good, got to be more of what we understand like slasher films to be. And then all the other Halloweens and all the other ripoffs like Friday the 13th and all that kind of stuff, they really became like slasher film kinds of things. But the original Halloween wasn't that as much, and what it was doing, no one else was really doing. I think the closest we got to it beforehand was probably Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. But there was a long expanse of time in which you didn't really have any type of atmospheric horror of this kind of disguised killer and following this female protagonist through this struggle until you get from Hitchcock's Psycho until you get to John Carpenter's Halloween. And then it just took off, and then you have more of them than you can count. It is really groundbreaking and amazing. Of course, there were plenty of murder and slasher films before Halloween, but none that were really artistic and atmospheric like that one was. It's cool. So the title of this episode, This is Halloween. I'm sure you probably understand that reference to The Nightmare Before Christmas, Tim Burton's excellent claymation that was inspired by those 60s, was it in the 60s, those Christmas claymations like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and those kinds of things. It was inspired by that kind of thing, or were those 50s? I don't recall. The kinds of things that Tim Burton really enjoyed when he was younger. He wanted to do one for Halloween, and he wanted it real claymation. And so although it was kind of, in a way, pastiche, I think it ended up being every bit as good. Well, it ended up being exactly the thing it was trying to be inspired by, and being that extra bit on top of that. I'm saying that in an awkward way. Maybe I'll point to a different one as an example and come back. Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein. It's funny as a Mel Brooks comedy, but it gives you everything that you would want out of watching like Son of Frankenstein, which is a pretty cool film. Actually, it's my favorite of the Frankenstein films. It gives you every little bit of atmosphere and like imagery and just that whole gothic feeling that you get out of the original things that it's supposedly making fun of. And so it makes fun of it while it is being the thing. I think that's what Nightmare Before Christmas does. It's just an excellent, heartwarming celebration of Halloween. What I consider to be Tim Burton's best film is also one that I can never separate in my heart and mind from Halloween, and that's Tim Burton's Ed Wood. His version of Ed Wood's story not only kind of repopularized the whole Ed Wood phenomenon in his films like Plan 9 from Outer Space and Glen or Glenda, but I think it added like an extra mythological layer to it, in that Ed Wood wasn't, I think, in real life anywhere near as interesting as Tim Burton's version of him. And watching Tim Burton's version of the making of those films makes those original films so much more interesting to watch. So that's the best thing you could hope for out of a movie about somebody like that. And it's absolutely this heartwarming buddy story about a whole bunch of freaks. And if you've listened to this show before, you know how much my heart goes out to freaks. And so you got this whole crew of freaks. You got Ed Wood, this toothless transvestite, overly enthusiastic, broke as hell director trying to make it in the monster movie business. You have Bela Lugosi, a washed up heroin addict of an actor that no one wants to hire anymore, and he's old and on his deathbed. And you have Bunny Breckenridge, played by Bill Murray, this flamboyant queen who's always just up for anything. You got this shyster TV medium who loves a little bit of hobby criming. You have Tor Johnson, the Swedish wrestler that Ed Wood uses as monsters in his film, but then at one point inexplicably uses him as the police officer in a film, and that's played by George the Animal Steele, one of the classic pro wrestlers of all time, a guy I grew up watching as he chewed the turnbuckles off of the wrestling ring. He was amazing. Everything I love, everything about that film, I absolutely love. In fact, for one Halloween, I went as Ed Wood, and I thought I planned on going as Ed Wood, and I thought, well, okay, so I gotta have the hair and the mustache and all that stuff, but I have to also dress in drag like he would, like this kind of image of Ed Wood in a skirt with like slick down hair and a slick mustache, but like, a long wool 50s style skirt and a pink Angora sweater. And so I just go to the mall and start asking around the different department stores whether they have any pink Angora. And everybody's looking at me like I'm insane. And I don't even say it's for me. And I thought, they think that they're supposed to be freaked out about a transvestite asking for pink Angora, when it turns out trying to find Angora in just like a shopping mall is pretty much insane. And little did I know, there was no way I could have afforded an Angora sweater at the time. So I ended up going with some, I don't know, fluffy, weird pink thing that looked close enough for a Halloween party. But in addition to Nightmare Before Christmas, there's another animated Halloween show that I think is absolutely phenomenal, and it aired on Cartoon Network, and it's a series, but it only did one season, and I think it was only meant to, and so I guess it's a cartoon mini series, I guess we'd call it. It's called Over the Garden Wall, and man, oh man, that gets everything right. Talk about music, atmosphere, characters. It's hilarious. It's even a little bit scary. Like in every episode, there are moments in which, like, you're wondering, what in the hell am I watching, and how do they let little kids watch this thing? But it never goes like it never like crosses the line to the grotesque. It always has this heartwarming feel to it, but it's got witches like anti-whispers, and it's got like this riverboat full of frogs on it who just want to hear some bassoon music. If you at all appreciate Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, and you want more really good autumn Halloween feel at extremely high quality level, especially in the writing of this thing, check out Over the Garden Wall. That's on like one of my bucket lists. Like if I ever get famous enough, right, or rich enough or talented enough to be able to like name my projects, who would I want to work with and what project would I want to do, one of my top 5 absolutely would be to be on the writing team for Over the Garden Wall season 2. I don't think it will ever happen with or without me, but that's absolutely something I would love. It's that good. Oh, for Halloween, what's something else I should talk about? Well, I mentioned a Halloween costume. Maybe I'll run through a few Halloween costumes I've done. One of them I had to do, of course, Ash from Evil Dead 2. Of course, you could say like Army of Darkness or Evil Dead. And then recently he got popular again and got a TV show and stuff. But years and years, was it decades ago? A long time, well more than a decade ago. I just couldn't get enough of Evil Dead 2. Well, I guess, and Army of Darkness. But I wanted it to be a dynamic costume. So at this Halloween party, I wanted to start off as normal Ash and then progressively, like, fight deadites in the house and my hand get possessed, and then I had to have one moment at the party where I'm fighting my own hand and take a chainsaw and chop it off, and then I have to build my chainsaw appendage and then have my chainsaw hand for the rest of the night. And so I go from essentially just like a normal looking dude in Ash attire, like the blue shirt and the gray pants and the black hair and everything like that. And then by the end of the night, I'm covered in blood and I have a chainsaw hand and the whole deal. And so I think that was one of my few like fully dynamic Halloween costumes that in order for it to be right, the character had to change through the night and through the course of the party. It was my party, and so I don't think think it was disallowed in any way to make such a spectacle of myself for my costume. If you're coming to my Halloween party, expect me to be a little bit too over the top about Halloween and costumes and you name it. I think one of my favorite Halloween costumes of all time was when I was a real little kid. I was obsessed with the Joker, and Batman was kind of cool and whatever, and He-Man was kind of cool, but I loved Skeletor and I loved Joker, and now it's no surprise after I look back on it and I understand what's wrong with me. No, I don't understand what's wrong with me. I understand that something is deeply wrong with me, and I'm totally okay with it now. And so it makes perfect sense that I would, of course, love the villains and the monsters. But I loved Joker. And my grandmother was kind enough to sew me a whole purple suit together, or tailor me a little kid's purple suit. And she even installed for me, or left a space so I could install one of my Joker gags. And so in this case, it was one of the flowers on the lapel that squirted water. I really wanted it to squirt acid so I could burn people, but that really was beyond my capabilities as a second grader or third grader, and so I had to settle for just water. But I had the hand buzzer too. Unfortunately, it did not shock people to death. It was in aspects of it was a disappointing outfit, but overall I thought I looked identical to like Jack Nicholson's Joker. I had the green hair, perfect purple suit, excellent makeup. That was a night of heaven for a little kid who's messed up like I am. Maybe we should back out and talk about for a moment like Halloween in general. Like, what's up with this thing? Where does it come from? Weird thing about trying to find out history, the history of Halloween, is you get so many different answers, and then you see so many different Halloween traditions in cultures that did not necessarily trade back and forth these kinds of traditions otherwise. You see all sorts of them have their own kind of traditions. And so it's really hard to pinpoint exactly, like if you're going to go, okay, modern American Halloween, where did that come from? It's not that clear. A lot of people point back to a Celtic festival of Samhain, which is essentially like summer's end. And so it makes sense that it's right on the change of seasons at the end of harvest, or roughly at the end of harvest, definitely marking the end of summer. And this is a time when summer ends and darkness begins. And so the veil thins, the veil between the living and the dead, the light and the dark, the known and the unknown, the good and the evil. Like there's a clear border most of the time, in most parts of the year, but not at this time of year. That's when spirits could cross over to the world of the living, or the world of the living, people of the living world might wander over into the other side and encounter the world of the dead, and maybe even see the skeletons dancing in the graveyards, right? This is the night for the spirits and the demons and the ghosts to celebrate. That shows up in a lot of cultures. Now, if you say, well, fundamentally, it probably was a seasonal marker or a harvest type of marker, then that kind of makes sense why across at least the northern hemisphere, you'd find so many different cultures having some type of version of Halloween. Now, like, why do so many cultures want to involve spirits of the dead in this? I don't know. Maybe it has to do with like the extended darkness and the coming cold or something like that. Or maybe there is something magical about the end of October every year, about this time every year. Maybe there is something about it. But in a lot of the, in the early Scottish culture, or in Scottish cultures, they would have a ceremony or a tradition they called guising, which was just like short for disguising, where children would dress up and then dance or sing or tell stories for candy. There were some traditions in which they would get more mischievous and like do bad things in the forms of devils or bad spirits, and I think all of those traditions hold together really well. I got a part-time second job one time at a Halloween store. I guess I could have used the money, but really I just like the idea of working at a Halloween store. That's how much I love Halloween, is I will even like want to work at a Halloween store just to be around more Halloween. And I wasn't really interested that much in working at my job. Instead, I just clocked in for my shift. I let somebody else handle the register, and then I went and just put on costumes and then just ran around the store in character. Whether it was like I don't know, characters from like Napoleon Dynamite or something like that, or I'd like mix and match different things. I found some type of mask and took it apart, and then got an orange jumpsuit, and then got another employee to tie me down on a dolly and move me around. And so I'd be Hannibal Lecter and have them push me up to like customers, and so I could like be in character as Hannibal Lecter, asking them over for dinner or what they're having for dinner, that kind of thing. I waited at any moment to get fired from this thing, but it turns out the owners thought that was really cool, and then they thought the customers thought it was cool, and so I just did that until the store closed. It was a Spirit Halloween store until it closed up for Halloween. Well, no, I was telling this for a reason. Oh, one of our guests, she kept coming back and she kept buying just huge cartloads, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars of Halloween stuff. Several times I saw her. I'm like, "You really love Halloween?" She goes, "Of course I do. I'm Jewish." I'm like, say what? She goes, "Oh, did you not know? Like, for Jews, Halloween is the one night a year that we have a full-on real celebration holiday that everyone else gets. We love this thing. Any money we would waste on Christmas, we really get to invest in Halloween." I don't know how true that is across the entire Jewish community, but I absolutely endorse that type of thinking, no matter what your tradition or culture. Well, at this point, I think I'm getting close to that 40-minute mark. And so I really hope you have an excellent Halloween, and that at one point or another you get terrified, and then I hope you make it through safely and then can enjoy that memory, and you rack those up one Halloween after another. And I hope to talk to you next week. Which monster are we going to talk about? You're going to have to stay tuned. I'll talk to you then next time on The Monster Professor.